Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Claire no way planned for it to end this way. Not with enchantresses echoing down the polished marble corridors of Newman Enterprises, not with Audra Cortez standing firm in place as two uniformed officers closed in, and clearly not with four quiet, ruinous words, Wharf like a final blow just seconds before Audra's life in Genoa City shattered fully. Yet as fate so frequently mandated in this city, secrets had a way of exploding all at formerly, leaving no room for denial, no space for escape. The atmosphere was thick with pressure long before the arrest. It had been erecting for weeks, stewing beneath the face of polite grins, commercial power plays, and precisely offered competitions. Claire had felt it in her bones. The sense that Audra's precisely constructed facade was eventually cracking. Audra had always been sharp, calculating, and dangerous in her own way. She moved through Genoa City like a chess master, always allowing 10 way ahead, always confident she could outthink anyone who dared challenge her. For a long time that confidence had worked. But this time she had undervalued the one person who knew how to stay. Claire. From the moment Claire returned to Genoa City, Audra had viewed her as an vexation, an handicap maybe but no way a real trouble. Audra believed power came from dominance, from forcing others into submission. Claire, on the other hand, believed in tolerance. She observed. She heeded. She let people reveal themselves. And Audra had revealed far further than she realized. The downfall began still. A lost document. A rumored phone call eavesdropped in a hallway. A fiscal distinction buried deep in a shell company Audra assumed no bone would ever examine nearly. Claire saw the patterns incontinently. This wasn't just commercial manipulation. This wasn't just ambition gone too far. This was felonious. And worse, it involved innocent people who had trusted Audra with their livelihoods, their futures, and in one case their freedom. For Claire, the decision to act hadn't come fluently. There was a time when she might have brazened Audra directly, demanded answers, given her a chance to explain. But Claire had learned the hard way that Audra didn't confess out of guilt. She confessed only when cornered. And indeed also, she twisted the verity to suit her requirements. So Claire did the one thing Audra no way anticipated. She went to Victor Newman. Victor heeded in silence as Claire laid out everything. Every document, every sale, every connection Audra allowed. She had hidden. He didn't intrude. He didn't question her motives. When Claire finished, Victor simply jounced and said, "Leave this with me." That was when Claire knew there was no turning back. The arrest happened 2 days laterally. Audra was in the middle of a meeting, seated confidently at the conference table, delivering a pitch with her usual fostering presence. She didn't indeed notice the officers at first. It was Kyle who saw them and went pale. It was Nate who stopped taking notes. And it was Claire, standing still near the glass wall, who met Audra's eyes as consummation actualized. Audra stood suddenly. "What's this?" she demanded, her voice sharp but controlled. "Who are you?" "Audra Cortez," one officer said calmly. "You're under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, inhibition of justice, and conspiracy." The words hit the room like a lemon. Audra laughed. Actually laughed, shaking her head in unbelief. "This is ridiculous. You have no idea who you're dealing with." But she did. And so did Claire. As the officer stepped closer, Audra's aspect locked onto Claire with unforeseen clarity. All the pieces clicked into place. The documents. The questions. The timing. Claire hadn't attacked her intimately. She hadn't hovered her. She had disassembled her still, efficiently, without ever raising her voice. "You," Audra said, her tone low and dangerous. "You did this." Claire didn't respond right down. She awaited until the officers placed the bond on Audra's wrists, until the room voided, until the vision of control Audra cleaved to was fully gone. Only also did Claire step forward, near enough that only Audra could hear her. Audra's eyes burned with rage. "Say it," she whizzed. "Say whatever you suppose you've won." Claire leaned in slightly, her expression undecipherable, her voice calm but unyielding. "I advised you formerly." "For words." Audra sat. Not because the words were loud or dramatic, but because they were true. There had been a moment weeks ago, When Claire had looked Audra in the eye and told her to stop, to walk down before effects went too far, Audra had laughed also, brushing her off like she brushed off everyone she believed was beneath her. In that moment, standing in bind, Audra understood the depth of her mistake. "This isn't over," Audra rumored, despair creeping into her voice. "You suppose captivity will silence me?" Claire uncurled, meeting her aspect with steady resoluteness. "No. I suppose captivity will eventually make you hear." The officers attended Audra out, her heels clicking sprucely against the bottom until they faded down the hall. The door closed. The room fell silent. But the consequences were just beginning. News of Audra's arrest spread through Genoa City like campfire. Some were shocked. Others weren't surprised at all. Kyle plotted with guilt, replaying every moment he trusted Audra, wondering how he missed the signs. Nate felt wrathfulness, at Audra, at himself, at the damage she had caused. Victor, as always, remained collected, formerly allowing several way ahead about how to contain the fallout. Claire, meanwhile, felt no triumph, only prostration. That night, she sat alone in her apartment, replaying the moment over and over again. Audra's face, the bond, the way those 4 words had landed heavier than any blameworthiness ever could. Claire didn't feel victorious. She felt changed. Crossing that line, being the bone who assured someone differently went to captivity, was an commodity you simply moved on from. In captivity, Audra's reality hit hard and presto. No developer close, no sidekicks, no influence, just cold walls and too important time to suppose. At night, when the noise faded and the lights bedimmed, Audra replayed Claire's words in her mind. "I advised you formerly. Not I destroyed you. Not you merited this." Just a simple statement of fact. For the first time in her life, Audra felt commodity dangerously close to lament. Back in Genoa City, Claire tried to reclaim normality. She returned to work. She smiled when applicable. She avoided talking about Audra unless necessary. But people looked at her else now. They saw strength where they formerly saw query. They saw someone able of ending a war without firing a single public shot. Victor noticed it too. "You did what demanded to be done," he told her one evening. "No way apologize for that." Claire jounced, though part of her wondered if justice always had to feel so heavy. Weeks laterly, a letter arrived. No return address. Just her name. Inside was a single line, written in careful, deliberate handwriting. "You were right." Claire folded the letter sluggishly, her expression undecipherable. Audra Cortez was behind bars, her conglomerate disassembled, her future uncertain. But the story between them wasn't defined by abomination or vengeance. It was defined by 4 words spoken at exactly the right moment. And in Genoa City, that made all the difference. The letter sat unopened on Claire's kitchen counter for hours. She had brought in the correspondence absent-mindedly, dropped her keys into the ceramic coliseum by the door, demurred off her shoes, and poured herself a glass of water before she indeed realized what it was. When she eventually noticed the envelope, straight, unmarked, addressed in careful handwriting, her casket tensed. Claire had learned to trust her instincts, and every instinct she had told her exactly who it was from. Audra. Claire didn't open it right down. She couldn't. Doing so felt like continuing a door she had worked so hard to close. Audra was in captivity. The legal system had taken over. There was supposed to be distance now, emotional distance, moral distance. Claire had told herself that formerly Audra was doomed. Once the noise faded, she'd eventually be suitable to breathe. But Audra Cortez had no way been someone who accepted silence. When Claire eventually unfolded the letter and read the 4 words, "You were right," she felt commodity unanticipated twist inside her. It wasn't relief. It wasn't satisfaction. It was commodity far more dangerous. Connection. She folded the letter sluggishly, pressing the crinkle flat with her thumb, and goggled out the window at the lights of Genoa City. This city had a way of pulling people back into old patterns, old wars, old emotional snares that no way truly ended. Claire knew better than to assume Audra's admission was check. Audra didn't do check. She did survival. And survival always came with a plan. Inside the women's corrective installation 2 counties down, Audra sat on the edge of her narrow bunk, the concrete walls cold indeed through layers of institutional makeup. Captivity had stripped her of everything she used to define herself by: power, appearance, influence. No acclimatized suits. No corner services. No precisely curated image. And then, she was just another capture with a number sutured onto her livery. At first, Audra had told herself this was temporary. Prayers would be filed. Deals would be made. Someone would step by. Someone always did. But days turned into weeks, and reality set in with brutal clarity. No bone was coming. The silence from Genoa City was blaring. No callers. No calls from former abettors. No dispatches slipped through the cracks. Audra had erected her conglomerate on transactional fidelity, and now that she had nothing to offer, those deals had expired. It was in that silence that Claire's voice returned to her. Not loud, not cruel, just calm and certain. I advised you formerly. Audra abominated how frequently she replayed it. She abominated that Claire hadn't exulted. Hadn't disrespected her. Hadn't indeed raised her voice. Claire had looked at her the way someone looks at a storm they know is about to break, formerly abnegated to the damage but set to ride it. That consummation hurt more than the bond ever did. Back in Genoa City, the fallout continued to ripple outward. Newman Enterprises released precisely articulated statements distancing itself from Audra's crimes. Victor moved fleetly. Icing the company's character remained complete. He framed the reproach as an insulated incident, a treason of trust rather than a systemic failure. The board accepted it without question. They always did. Kyle still wasn't sleeping. He replayed every discussion he'd had with Audra, every moment he'd defended her to others, every time he dismissed Claire's quiet enterprises as paranoia or instability. Guilt eroded at him relentlessly. He sought out Claire one evening, standing awkwardly in her doorway, doubtful whether he'd the right to be there at all. I owe you an reason, he said eventually. Claire studied him for a long moment before stepping away to let him in. She didn't offer comfort. She didn't offer forgiveness. She simply heeded. I should have believed you, Kyle continued. I allowed. I knew her. I allowed. I knew what she was able of, and what she wasn't. Claire folded her arms, leaning against the counter. Audra is veritably good at making people believe what she wants them to believe. Kyle exhaled sluggishly. You didn't do this to her, did you? Claire met his aspect. No. She did it to herself. I just stopped looking down. That distinction signified further than Kyle realized. Nate, meanwhile, plotted with a different kind of reckoning. Audra's arrest had forced him to defy uncomfortable trueness about his own ambition, about how fluently he justified questionable choices because they served him. He visited Audra formerly, against everyone's advice. The meeting was brief and tense. You look different, Audra said through the glass, her expression guarded. So do you, Nate replied. For a moment neither of them spoke. The weight of everything implied pressed heavily between them. Claire did this, Audra said eventually. Nate shook his head. No. Claire finished it. There's a difference. Audra's jaw tensed. You're defending her. I'm admitting reality, Nate said still. Commodity you no way did. That visit stayed with Audra long after Nate left. It forced her to defy the possibility that Claire wasn't just her adversary. She was her glass, the interpretation of herself that chose restraint over recklessness, tolerance over pride. And Audra abominated that nearly as important as she respected it. Weeks latterly, Claire entered another letter. Also another. They were no way long. No way emotional. No way contending. Audra didn't apologize. She didn't supplicate. She wrote with the same perfection she always had, controlled, deliberate, strategic. She spoke of captivity life without complaint, of the routines she followed, of the people she observed. Claire didn't reply. She told herself she wouldn't. She told herself this was Audra testing boundaries, searching for a way back into her head. And yet, Claire kept every letter. Victor noticed. You're being careful, he observed one autumn, his tone neutral. Claire strengthened. I'm being observant. Victor studied her. Don't confuse alert with obligation. Claire jounced, though she wasn't sure where the line was presently. The turning point came suddenly. A reproach broke involving a former associate of Audra's, Someone Claire had no way trusted. New substantiation surfaced suggesting that certain crimes attributed solely to Audra had been orchestrated by someone differently, using her as a guard. The execution restarted corridor of the case. The media circled hungrily. And suddenly, Audra wasn't just a condemned miscreant. She was a log-rolling chip. The quarter attorney reached out to Claire Still, requesting a meeting. "Miss Grace," he said precisely, "your sapience into Miss Cortez has proven precious before." Claire understood incontinently what he was asking. Audra, from behind bars, still had information. And Claire was the one person Audra might trust enough to partake it with. The irony wasn't lost on her. That night, Claire goggled at the phone for a long time before telephoning the number on the last letter Audra had transferred. The one pronounced legal correspondence only. Audra answered on the alternate ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," she said calmly. Claire closed her eyes. "I need to know how deep it goes." Audra broke. "And what do I get in return?" Claire didn't vacillate. "The verity hurt. Not just yours but everyone's." Silence stretched between them. Eventually Audra spoke. "You always did know when to make the right offer." That call changed everything. Over the coming several weeks, Claire came in doubtful conciliator, navigating exchanges that blurred moral lines and tested her resoluteness. Audra handed names, documents, timeline substantiation that intertwined people far more important than either of them had realized. Deals were negotiated. Charges were reevaluated. Rulings acclimated. Audra wasn't freed. But she wasn't forgotten. And neither was Claire. Genoa City buzzed with enterprise. Some called Claire valorous. Others rumored that she was dangerous in her own right. She had stumbled Audra without theatrics, without bloodshed. And now she was impacting issues from behind the scenes. Victor watched with quiet blessing. "You're learning how power really works," he told her. Claire wasn't sure she liked the assignment. Months laterally, Claire visited Audra in person for the first time. The room was stark. The glass cold wave. Audra looked healthier than Claire anticipated. Slender, sharper, her eyes more focused. "You came," Audra said. Claire jounced. "I demanded to see you." Audra lifted her head. "Closure." Claire considered that. "Understanding." Audra smiled noiselessly. "That's always been your strength." They sat in silence for a moment. "Do you lament it?" Claire asked eventually. Audra didn't answer right down. When she did, her voice was quiet. "I lament not hearkening when someone eventually told me the verity without wanting anything in return." Claire swallowed. "Those 4 words. I advised you formerly," Audra finished. "They hang me." Claire stood. "They weren't meant to." Audra met her aspect. "They saved me." Claire left the captivity doubtful whether she believed that, but knowing one thing for certain. Audra Cortez was no longer the woman she had been. And in Genoa City that meant one thing. The story wasn't over. It was just evolving. Captivity had changed Audra Cortez in ways she hadn't anticipated, but not in the ways anyone allowed. She wasn't weaker. She wasn't broken. She was sharper, colder, and more focused than ever. Stripped of her power, of her network, and of her precisely constructed public image, she had been forced to defy the raw core of herself, and it scarified her lower than it exhilarated her. The world outdoors might have allowed. They'd won. Claire had smiled, Victor had jounced, and Genoa City had moved on. But Audra hadn't moved on. She had learned the art of tolerance, of staying for the perfect moment to strike back. And strike she would. Her first plan began still. She observed her fellow convicts, noting who had connections, who had influence, and who might be useful in her ultimate scheme. She heeded when guards complained. She absorbed particles of news from the TV in the common room. And most importantly, she allowed. About Claire. Claire, who had spoken 4 words that had visited her. "I advised you formerly." The sting of those words had been sharp enough to cut pride, but it had also planted a seed in Audra, a seed she intended to cultivate into revenge. Back in Genoa City, life had preceded its superficial calm. Newman Enterprises worked like a well-waxed machine, with Victor icing that the reproach girding Audra no way touched his conglomerate again. Ka was still scuffling with guilt. Nate still dallied on the moral Argentine zones Audra had forced him to defy. And Claire was floundering with a subtle, troubling apprehension, the sense that while Audra was behind bars, her influence hadn't dissolved fully. Started with small effects. Strange phone calls that sounded disconnected, but were designedly timed. Emails transferred from untraceable accounts. Rumors rumored through collective familiarity of someone gathering power in the murk. Claire noticed the pattern nearly incontinently. Commodity about it didn't feel accidental. She hadn't realized it yet, but Audra was testing boundaries, measuring Claire's responses, probing for weakness, and relating implicit abettors and adversaries in the process. Meanwhile, Audra began erecting connections with outside connections she had trusted in the once, or those who could be converted to trust her again. Letters were smuggled out through legal correspondence, always precise, always precisely articulated. Each letter had binary purposes: first, to subtly manipulate the donors, and second, to give Claire with breadcrumbs. She wanted Claire to know she was active, watching, allowing, but not too important, not yet. It was a game of murk, one Audra intended to win. One evening, Victor approached Claire in his office at Newman Enterprises. The windows overlooked the megacity skyline, but Victor's attention was entirely on the papers spread across his office. "You've noticed it, haven't you?" he asked, his tone indeed but right. Claire looked up, meeting his aspect. "The inconsistencies? The unusual exertion? Yes, but I'm not sure it's anything substantial yet." Victor leaned back, steepling his fritters. "Audra Cortez isn't in captivity. Not truly. Not where it matters. She can't touch anyone physically, but she can manipulate. She always has. And if she's using her time wisely," his voice traced off. The recrimination was clear. Audra's reach was long, and Victor knew she was dangerous precisely because of her intellect intolerance. Claire jounced sluggishly. "So we stay and watch." Victor smiled noiselessly. "No. We act. But precisely. You've done well by letting her fall into her own trap formerly. Now we've to anticipate her coming move." Meanwhile, Audra began introducing subtle chaos into Newman Enterprises. She coordinated small, putatively unconnected mishaps, delayed shipments, a misfiled contract, a minor leak in the IT system. Each dislocation was small enough to feel accidental but orchestrated with a perfection that betrayed her. Claire noticed these anomalies, but she couldn't prove their source. It was like fighting a ghost in the machine, and Audra loved it. As the weeks passed, Audra's influence expanded. She set up a way to connect with Kyle laterally, transferring letters disguised as updates about her own case, subtly probing his fidelity and testing whether he still felt guilt. Kyle, naive in some ways, began to partake information unintentionally, fiscal tidbits, commercial vulnerabilities, and indeed particular dubieties. Audra soaked it all up like water, enriching her understanding of the chessboard. Nate grew suspicious as well. He'd started noticing irregularities in reports, rumors of new investments, and unforeseen shifts in customer connections. One autumn, he possessed Kyle in the Newman parking garage. "Kyle, I suppose you're undervaluing her," Nate said, his voice tense. "Audra's not just behind bars. She's playing from captivity, and she's good at it. You need to be careful about what you're telling her." Indeed, laterally. Kyle lowered. "I don't know what you mean." "I slightly. She's watching. She's calculating. And she's case." Nate intruded. "You suppose we're safe because of walls and bars? We're not. Not if Claire hasn't reckoned for every angle." Claire, meanwhile, was preparing for her own battle with Audra. She had come to understand that Audra wasn't just a miscreant. She was a strategist, a master manipulator whose mind worked like a mystification designed to ent-oil others. Claire demanded to anticipate moves she couldn't see yet, to read signals that were faint but telling. And she couldn't do it alone. She enlisted Victor's counsel, and indeed Nate and Kyle were drawn into the planning, reluctantly getting pawns in a game that only Audra completely understood. The first face-to-face hassle after Audra's captivity letters was arranged under strict supervision. Claire entered the visiting room cautiously. The glass partition separated them physically, but couldn't separate their participated history. Audra looked up, eyes bright with implied schemes. She didn't smile. She didn't supplicate. She simply said, "You came." Claire kept her expression neutral. "I had to. We need to talk about what's coming." Audra leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped. Next is always complicated. You know that. I know, Claire said. But we can't ignore what's passing. You've started impacting effects outside these walls. It's only going to get worse if we don't manage it. Audra lifted her head, a subtle smile lugging at her lips. Manage? That's an intriguing choice of word. I prefer observe. Claire's tolerance flitted just compactly. Observe, manipulate, whatever you want to call it. It's affecting people. Innocent people. Audra's eyes hardened. Innocent? Everyone makes choices, Claire. Some pay sooner. Some latterly. Don't pretend you've no way hurt anyone in the process. Claire bristled but controlled herself. She had learned long ago that Audra thrived on responses. She didn't give her that satisfaction. Rather, she concentrated on the future. Here precisely, Claire said, lowering her voice. I'm giving you a chance, not a warning, not a trouble, but a chance. Any move you make that endangers anyone, indeed laterally, and I'll make sure the authorities know exactly what you've done. Audra smiled, a bloodsucker's smile. And what if I accept your challenge? What if I play on, but my description of venturing doesn't match yours? Claire's eyes narrowed. Also, we will see who outlasts whom. The discussion ended as listed, but its goods gurgled through both their lives. Claire returned to her apartment, adrenaline still high. Her mind replayed every nuance, every hidden signal in Audra's words. Every slight boo, every vacillation. Audra was formerly planning multiple moves ahead. Claire had to be prepared. Outside, Audra returned to her bunk, her mind alive with possibilities. She had planted the first seeds, and she had observed responses. The megacity was her board. Claire was her most good adversary yet, the one whose intelligence could nearly compete her own. Nearly but not entirely. Audra's coming move involved others abettors she had trusted ahead, captures who had connections outside the walls, loose officers who could be converted, and indeed Nate and Kyle, unwittingly caught in her web. She began casting scripts that would destabilize Newman Enterprises subtly, using circular pressure points, legal loopholes, and fiscal manipulations. Each action was timed with perfection, leaving no trace back to her directly. Audra's genius was her tolerance, and tolerance was an armament. Meanwhile, Claire noticed minor shifts. Reports of missing contracts, unanticipated request movements, and subtle miscommunications began to pile up. It was as if someone was pushing pieces on a board she couldn't see. Her instincts screamed Audra. But how? She was behind bars. Her letters were covered. She couldn't act without leaving traces. Yet commodity was passing. Kyle and Nate approached Claire one evening. Commodity's going on, Nate said. Small effects but enough to make me nervous. Audra's fingerprints might not be non-fictional, but they're there. I know it. Claire jounced sluggishly. I've seen it. And I suppose she's just getting started. Victor's voice was the final piece of the mystification. Audra Cortez doesn't make miscalculations. Not presently. Every misstep you see? She allowed it. Every leak? Calculated. And you, Claire, are in her crosshairs whether you admit it or not. The consummation settled over Claire like a storm pall. This wasn't just about her presently. It was about everyone in Genoa City connected to Newman Enterprises. Audra was conniving, calculating, manipulating, and staying for the perfect moment to strike. And the 4 words I advised you formerly still echoed in Claire's mind. But this time they weren't a warning. They were a pledge. As Claire prepared her coming move, Audra continued weaving her web. Letters continued to arrive, subtle, enciphered, and precise. She manipulated abettors, observed responses, and calculated timing with a perfection that made her nearly untouchable. And in the quiet moments of the captivity night, she smiled, knowing that the game was far from over. Genoa City, blissfully ignorant of the storm brewing in the murk, continued its routine. But the calm would not last. Audra Cortez had learned from her defeat. She had acclimated. And soon, veritably soon, Claire and everyone additional would see just how murderous a patient mind could be. The chessboard was set. The pieces were in stir. And the coming move would change everything.